Greetings. Do without wilt should be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and welcome to another Walk Magick video. So today, we're going to be going over and exploring the subject of astral travel, and pretty much the astral light in general. So, before we begin, we're really close to the spring equinox of 2024, and I'm going to be giving away a 2/5 scale Stellia Revealing replica. So please like, comment, subscribe, and share this video so we can reach more subscribers. And how that's going to work is I've posted on Facebook. I'm going to make a short video that I'll upload on either the 19th or the 20th. Hopefully I can do it on the equinox on the 19th. And so you'll comment on that video, and I'll give full instructions about what to comment and how to contact me through Facebook, Instagram, and all of that. So just stay tuned, because the very next thing I'll be uploading after this is the video on how to win a free Stellia Revealing. Handmade, hand painted, I cut wood, I do everything from scratch. So stay tuned for that. We're getting really close. It's exciting. And with that out of the way, let's begin. So, in my Magic and Theory and Practice video on Chapter 18, in Part 1, the Body of Light, I cover the astral light as it pertains to the human body. I also briefly cover rising on the planes, but I don't go too much into detail. The astral light, though, and traveling requires definitely a video or two all of its own. This is that video, and actually it's the first of two. So today we're going to recap the body of light. Then we're going to go over what the astral light is and what astral beings are. In my opinion, this is a vital subject and a mandatory one for magicians practicing the Lima and the magic of Aleister Crowley. In the follow-up to this, I'll make the video pretty much on how to manipulate astral light in ritual/meditation and how to actually travel on the astral planes. So this is the theory. The next video will be the practice. So no one covers the astral light better, perhaps, than Eliphas Levi. In his Doctrine and Ritual of High Magic, he explains many of the concepts we are exploring today, though there is a lot more to say on how to really grasp the concept, especially when you're new and you don't really know how you can interact or see the astral light. So we're going to go over all of that. Eliphas Levi defines the astral as, quote, "The astral light or terrestrial fluid, which we call the great magical agent, is saturated with images or reflections of all kinds, which the soul can evoke and submit to its diaphany," meaning translucency. So the soul can evoke and submit the astral light to its diaphany, translucency, as the Kabbalists say. These images are always present in us and are only erased by the stronger imprint of the reality of the waking world, or by preoccupation with our thoughts, which render our imagination inattentive to the mobile panorama of the astral light. When we sleep, this spectacle presents itself to us, and it is thus that we perceive reveries which are incoherent and vague, unless some dominant will remains active during sleep and gives, unbeknownst to our intellect, a direction to the reverie, which then transforms it into a dream." End quote. So note that Levi states that the astral realm is seen through dreams. I will cover lucid dreaming in the next video, but it's important to note the state of consciousness while dreaming is often associated with the unconscious mind of the waking world. Thus, inducing a state of trance, which activates the dreaming part of the brain while awake, should theoretically allow one to interact directly with the astral realm. In Greer's translation of Levi's book, in the introduction, Greer equates the astral with, quote, "the prana of the Hindu scriptures, the ki or chi of the Chinese tradition, the ruach of the Jewish lore, the pneuma of the ancient Gnostics, and the anima mundi of the medieval and Renaissance Christianity. The Japanese call it ki, the Arabs ru, the Yoruba emi, the Iroquois orenda, and the Kung hunter-gatherers of the Kalahari Desert na'um." End quote. Further, Greer writes, quote, "The astral light might well be an ancient name for the ether," end quote. In my opinion, it may also have similarities to Akasha of the yogi, especially the tattvas, Akasha, that it is like spirit and capable of imprinting images upon it. Everything that happens in the physical world is imprinted upon the astral, including every physical action and thought. Let me here pause to use the middle pillar of the Tree of Life as a symbol for how the astral light came to be. The source of everything is the Ein Sof, limitless light. It is not an actual light, the Ein Sof. Light, in this case, is merely a symbol for the source of creation. Because thousands of years ago, it was probably thought that light coming from the sun, that light, was not a physical thing. Therefore, the sun, the brightest thing the ancients probably knew of, became a perfect symbol of God, the source of a spiritual substance. And yet, the sun was a physical object, perhaps opaque and emanating light endlessly. Well, the Ein Sof, as the source of all things, eventually culminated in the first emanation, Kether. Kether, the crown, is often synonymous with the divine light. It is also intangible and is one thing, thus in union, and not capable of anything but individuality, singular, without room for division of more than itself, no other personality. However, I tend to also look at Kether as more like a prism than just light. A prism which the limitless light rays through and is refracted from unity into the primary colors in Chakma. Note that Chakma's princess scale of color is white, rayed red, yellow, and blue, the three primary colors. So it's like the light of the Ein Sof comes filtered through Kether and is refracted from like a brilliant white light into the primary colors, which then go on to create everything else. Skipping a few steps and sticking to just the middle pillar, after a few alchemical things happened to the limitless light, the divine light manifested as Tifereth, synonymous with the sun of the universe and the heart and mind of man. Now again, keep in mind these things are all symbolic. We are not to look at the sun of our solar system as the only light source, which is a manifestation of Ein Sof. Everything in the universe is of the source. We are just using light as a symbol of how we in the universe came to be. So, now at Tifereth, we are focusing on the middle of the Tree of Life, the halfway point from the Kabbalistic 0 to Malkuth, the kingdom, the number 10. Connecting Tifereth to Kether is the path of Gimel, which corresponds with Luna. The moon is not a source of light. It reflects the sun's rays, making it glow. Well, symbolically, Luna is, in this stage, a symbol of the light from Kether reflecting through the nothingness into a physical object, the sun. So the moon, in this case, reflects the light of Kether into Tifereth. These things take meditation, and words lack the actuality of what is occurring. Let me try it like this. The sun is a symbol of consciousness, and the moon of unconsciousness, the positive and the negative. In terms of the creation of the universe, these symbols are like mediators, symbolizing the source becoming a physical thing. The moon being like the yin, and the sun the yang. It is like the light of Kether passing through the medium of nothingness and eventually running out of momentum. Thus, its, let's say, particles or photons stop, accumulate, begin joining together, and then begin affecting each other through heat, friction, density, and vibration. Thus, once enough of these spiritual particles have accumulated, pressure is built up, eventually collapsing upon itself and then exploding into carbon or whatever the first physical things were, gases and the like. From the symbol of the sun, down the middle pillar, the light keeps going through transmutations, and we arrive at Yesod, corresponding again with Luna. Now the sun being a source of actual light, though physical and denser than the not light of the Ein Sof, is capable of interacting with opaque surfaces. Thus the moon as a symbol is a source which reflects the light of Tifereth, itself a reflection of the source. In Yesod is the astral realm, in my opinion. Now Malkuth, just below Yesod, Malkuth is very close to being a physical plane. It is the densest form of the Ein Sof after many subtle changes. Yesod being one step up lacks the opaqueness of Malkuth. Malkuth, which is still an emanation of the light, keep in mind all the Sephiroth are here and now. We separate them for the sake of being able to analyze all of the moving parts. Yesod is where to find the astral light as a correspondence. Let me use this. Let me try an analogy. So if I use glass as a symbol, Malkuth would be like an opaque volcanic glass, obsidian. It's dark, it reflects light and images if objects are close enough to it, and yet it's not transparent. It's very opaque. Yesod would be in this scenario like stained glass, colorful and containing images or portraits, sometimes symbolic. The sun would be like a clear gas, allowing light to pour through, physical yet closer to being transparent. Kether would be like a glass transparent that you could somehow walk right through. And there's no such thing that actually exists, but that also makes it a fine analogy for Kether. Perhaps think of like grains of sand sparkling and floating, spaced out from each other grain from grain, like a sheet of sand that you can walk right through, but yet is floating in space. That would be like Kether. The Ein Sof would be the source of that transparent illusory glass, not even void of void. Perhaps the Ein Sof would even be the source of the sand which eventually makes glass. In this scenario, we're interested in the stained glass in this essay, containing images and light and the like. Of course, now all of these chosen symbols are physical things, but I'm trying to communicate them as symbols, containing some quality which can explain various stages of the light from the source to its transformation into physical reality. The way I'm using glass symbolically here is the same way the Kabbalah uses the planets. The Ein Sof created the Astral Light. The Astral Light is the lower reflection of the limitless light. And both are everywhere at all times. In chapter 2 of the Doctrine by Levi, while explaining the two poles, mercy and severity, or B and J of Freemasonry, he writes about the astral, quote, "In the soul of the world, which is the universal agent, there is a current of love and a current of wrath. This ambient fluid which penetrates all things, this detached ray of the sun's glory, which is fixed by the weight of the atmosphere and by the central attractive force. This body of the Holy Spirit that we call the universal agent, and which the ancients represented with the symbol of the snake biting its tail, this electromagnetic ether, this vital and luminous calorific, is symbolized in the ancient monuments by Isis's belt, which turns and returns in a knot of love around the two poles, and by the serpent biting its tail, emblem of prudence and of Saturn." End quote. So by this point, we're starting to get an image and an idea of the light, be it astral, the Ein Sof, all types of light, but especially the astral. In my experience, the astral light's natural state is an electric blue color, and it tends to manifest to physical appearance as globular balls of various sizes. A magician who has learned to work with it can change the shape and color of it by force of will. And even though it appears as spheres naturally, it is important to note that it is actually everywhere. It's not just in a sphere floating. You know, when you see it, it's everywhere, even where you don't see it. It's kind of like stars in this sense. Even though the light of the sun can only be seen from its source and as it reflects off an opaque object, the light of the sun is everywhere as far as its photons can reach. In the space between the sun and the earth, even though it appears that the empty space is shrouded in darkness, there are light photons. There is light there which cannot be seen by the eye, simply because they're not reflecting off of a surface. So the astral light is kind of like that. Though, I have noticed when doing ritual for myself, especially midnight Liber-Resh, especially in a dark place, when I raise my consciousness up a notch through the ecstatic response to worship, I tend to notice a sparkling appearance all over the room I'm in at that moment. It's almost as if I'm standing in a snowstorm of shimmering flakes glittering all around me. That sparkling, those flakes, that snowstorm I'm standing in, that's the astral light. I remember when I was a new magician, although I could invoke deities okay enough and see a great many conjurations in my mind's eye, and I noticed the shimmering during Liber-Resh, specifically at midnight, most especially. It was during my first magical retreat, led by my teacher, that I saw the astral light as a form tangible and not just sporadic. So let me just point out, the limo was meant to be taught via a teacher. You know, it's something that's transmitted from somebody who knows what's going on. Today, everything's online. You could try practices for yourself. And yeah, you should try practices. I really recommend finding a teacher, whether in AA, do your research and find what lineage and their leanings and worldviews fit best with your worldview. Don't just join one because somebody says this is the one you should join, I think you should do your own research. Or find a teacher. Sometimes you're just attracted to somebody. And finding a teacher really is important, because somebody who knows how to work Crowley's magic systematically from beginning to end, so that you're not lost. Where do I start? How do I do this? And also, if you're doing something wrong and don't realize it, somebody's there to course correct you so that you don't make mistakes and you actually make progress. So if it wasn't for my teacher, I would not have been able to see and interact with the Astral Light the way I was after this first magical retreat. So I just wanted to put that plug. It's really important you find somebody who can guide you through these practices. So it was a 48-hour retreat of almost constant ritual from before sunrise all the way until I slept after midnight. Each of those 2 nights, I was given a 45-minute break to have dinner and just rest my mind for a few minutes. So during my break of the first evening, I sat on my sofa chair. I was in the living room, and I was living with my grandmother at the time. My bedroom was also my temple where I was doing all my rituals, and that's in the front of the house. Me and her sat in the living room in the middle of the apartment. I had been at the retreat over 18 hours out of 48. My cat was sitting on my lap, and I was just petting him. Suddenly, coming from the direction of my bedroom, a sphere of electric blue light about the size of a softball came floating into the living room. Now, I had never seen that before, and so I looked at it and I was following its movement. Then I saw my cat. He looked up and was staring at it, and his head was following its slow movement. He and I then looked at each other, and then back at the sphere, and then back at each other, both of us realizing that me and my cat both saw it. And I thought it was the craziest thing, and I started laughing. I was seeing something spiritual with my physical eyes, and it just made me so merry, so happy. I just was overtaken with laughter. So I was seeing something spiritual with my physical eyes, right? I told my teacher when my break was up, and he was encouraged that I was not only manifesting Astral Light, but was finally able to see it, not just in my mind. It was after this point that upon doing rituals like the LBRP, that making pentagrams of the Astral Light, I was able to see them with my physical eyes. That suddenly became easy. So I encourage everyone new, when you're just beginning, it's a process. It starts with seeing the astral in your mind's eye, and eventually you will learn how to endure the proper state of trance, which alters your consciousness just enough that what was once only a mental image suddenly becomes seen physically. Let me just recap again what the body of light is from my Magic and Darian practice video. Quote, so to summarize the body of light, it can be molded into any form, but it has a base state that is in the shape of the physical body exactly. One can leave their physical body in the body of light, allowing one to astral travel, going to various other planes, or to even remain on the physical plane and go anywhere instantly, even through walls or floors, etc. Another power of the body of light is God form assumption, as outlined in Libra O. One starts by envisioning that the image of a chosen God is coinciding with their body, enveloping or overlaying themselves. From there, with enough practice, it becomes easy to grasp one's body of light and mold it into the shape of the God form. Lastly, via the body of light, one can see all types of visions, be they orbs of light, shapes, forms, or other beings, or full-on visions like seeing a movie. These symbols can be interpreted, and with enough practice, one can learn that when they see a certain thing, it has a specific meaning to them, almost like interpreting omens. One might then theoretically even learn to see past or future as well as the present, end quote. And in addition, I also like to add that the aura of each person is, in my opinion, connected to the body of light. The aura is an egg-shaped light field that is about arm length from the body in all directions. The aura can be crystallized for protection and changed color to affect one's mood and emotional state. And just like the physical body, it needs to be well maintained to avoid illness and affected energy levels. Let's quickly look at Libra O, Section 3, verses 1 and 2, God form assumption. Quote, point 1, magical images of the gods of Egypt should be made thoroughly familiar. This can be done by studying them in any public museum or in such books as may be accessible to the student. They should then be carefully painted by them, both from the model and from memory. Point 2, the student seated in the God position or in the characteristic attitude of the God desired should then imagine his image or its image as coinciding with their own body or as enveloping it. This must be practiced until mastery of the image is attained and an identity with it and the God experienced. It is a matter for very great regret that no simple and certain test of success in this practice exists." End quote. It's subjective, so it's like you have to take your word that you're actually doing it correctly. Though a person that's teaching, if they have astral sight, they may be able to see it and tap into that and even course correct what you're doing. Your teacher, if they're powerful enough, know how to work the astral light, they could actually mold the image on top of you if it's your first or second time, and you could try to feel what they're doing. Note that this, and then how to vibrate divine names, are prescribed in Libra well before the LBRP and LBRH. So this practice must be first mastered as it helps in visualizing astral images. So you pick a deity that you're fond of and work at it multiple times a day. Liber Resh Vel Helios is the next step, as you are going to need the ability of God form assumption to use that text. It also helps if you're practicing physical clairvoyance of Liber E, as in my experience, trying to feel the energy emanating from a tarot card will help familiarize yourself with the elements, planets, and zodiac. And of course, deities are listed in the magician's tables as corresponding with these 22 astrological components. So say you're assuming the God form of Thoth. He corresponds with Mercury. It helps to know what his energy feels like as a mercurial agent, because you can incorporate that feeling into your body of light. These practices go a step further still. When you're performing ritual magic, especially planetary, say you need a new career, so you're going to work with Jupiter. By understanding how Jupiter feels, you can magnetize your body of light with the energies of Jupiter, changing the aura to colors suitable for Jupiter, thereby attracting that which falls under Jupiter's domain to you directly. Also, when doing invocations during ritual magic, one certified method is to use the invocation script with the formula of Yod He Vav He. The first part of the script recited is to wake up your consciousness with fiery aspirations to the deity, and then call it to you with descriptions of its physical and mental aspects. You do this on the astral plane externally to you, similar to assuming a God form, but the form is outside of you at first. Then you want to bring the image you've created into your body so that it fills your body and you can feel it. That's the watery aspect. Water fills any object that it's placed in. The God filling your body and you taking its shape. Next comes a union of you and the deity, the merging of your aspirations and it. This is air. Last comes the final manifestation of the deity and through your physical and mental body. This is the earthy aspect. It all takes place via the astral light and allows for a deity to work through you temporarily. The biggest problem I've seen with newcomers concerning astral light is reconciling whether astral images, when they're only seen in the mind's eye, whether they are imaginary or if they really and are actually affecting the astral light, if they're really there. So my response to that problem is this. The mental plane definitely affects the astral plane. Thoughts that start in the mind emanate outwards through the air, very much like radio waves. These thought forms directly affect the astral plane. Thoughts can even manifest when strong enough and fortified by will. So if you're new and wondering whether it's just in your mind, I would like to reassure you that your thoughts, images you create in your mind, definitely affect the astral plane, and imagination is the engine for this vehicle. So be patient with yourself. If you keep at it long enough, it won't be long until you're able to reconcile these things, and eventually with enough practice, you will be able to see the astral light with your physical eyes. And just lastly on the body of light, Crowley writes that a major part of magic is exposing your body of light to as many forces as possible. Exposure to more forces makes the body of light much stronger and enhances your ability to perform magic. Every ritual you perform, every deity invoked, every planetary force worked with, and every astral journey you take, all increase the durability and strength of the body of light. The more you travel on the astral, the better you get at it, the more and more you build your intuitive soul. Next up, looking at Crowley's Book 4, Appendix 3, Notes for an Astral Atlas. Crowley begins the document with the question, quote, Point 1. What are astral and spiritual beings? Man is one. It is a case of any consciousness assuming a sensible form. Microcosms and elementals. Maybe an elemental, e.g. a dog, has a cosmic conception in which he is a microcosm and a man incomplete. No way of deciding, as in case of space. Similarly, our gross matter may appear unreal to beings clad in fine matter." End quote. As we have covered the human astral form, let's go into what other astral beings there are out there. Point 11, quote, "Astral beings may thus be defined in the same way as immaterial objects. They are unknown causes of various observed effects." End quote. Crowley mandated study of philosophy of all the great thinkers through the ages for his students. This includes Plato, Descartes, Berkeley, and Kant, to name a few. Many of these philosophers at one point covered the topic of subjective and objective being. Whether the world perceived by our senses is an accurate assessment of the external world, or if our perception is flawed, inaccurate, or that the external world is not real and merely a perception of our brain making sense of nothingness. Whether we perceive it correctly or whether it even exists, the universe, that's irrelevant, as we end up perceiving it and we end up interacting with it regardless. Regarding astral beings or deities or spirits or visions in general, in Libro, Crowley warns the student, quote, "In this book it is spoken of the Sephiroth and of the paths, of spirits and conjurations, of gods, spheres, planes, and many other things which may or may not exist. It is immaterial whether these exist or not. By doing certain things, certain results will follow. Students are most earnestly warned against attributing objective reality or philosophic validity to any of them." End quote. I think this is the best approach to magic, especially towards the topic at hand, astral beings. When viewing the astral planes, you will come across many different kinds of entities. Whether they are conscious or merely giving voice by our perception of them is totally irrelevant. If you talk with them and get good information, that's what's important. They exist how we perceive them, and thus we could call them by their name if they tell it to us, or else label them according to how they appear. And that's pretty much enough. Quote, "We give a physical form and name to a bell, but not to its tone, though in each case we know nothing but our own impressions, but we record musical sounds by a special convention. We may therefore call a certain set of qualities Ratziel, or describe an impression as Saturnian, without pretending to know what anything is in itself. All we need to know is how to cast a bell that will please our ears, or how to evoke a spirit that will tell us things that are hidden from our intellectual faculties." End quote. And that's also from point 11. But how do we know whether an astral being is Saturnian or Jupiterian or whatever? So, one way to tell is by its appearance. Does it have colors, textures, or other qualities that appear Saturnian? Like, is it earthy or is it a satyr? If it is, then there's a good chance it has a relation to Saturn. The other way to tell is by its feel. Is there a density, heaviness, slowness? Does it feel powerful, ancient, or dark? Or any of those feelings emanating from it? The last way to classify entities is by their name. By looking at the letters of its name, we could get a gematria value, as well as the correspondences of each letter. This is why, at the very least, every Thelemic magician should know the Hebrew, Greek, and Enochian alphabets, as well as their basic correspondences, such as planets, mystical number, colors, etc. Also, if you're using astral traveling to a specific plane, the entities should be of the same quality as the plane. For example, if you go to a specific Sephiroth, say Gabora, the entities you encounter should be of a Mars nature. On the alchemical plane, related to some symbol of alchemy, either a planet/metal, an elemental of salt, sulfur, or mercury, or perhaps more obscure, such as related to one of the processes of alchemy, such as calcination, putrefaction, or of the rubedo, which is the red phase of the tincture. If you go into a tarot card, say Atu 13, Death, and you see a snake that turns into an eagle, that sounds about right. But if you go there and you meet twins, well, you're either in the wrong place or imagining the whole scenario. But be assured that either way, you should come out of that meditation with something to consider. Next, in point 12 of Notes on an Astral Atlas, Crowley continues posing an idea which may be similar to animism. Quote, A. Every object soever may be considered as possessed of an astral shape, sensible to our subtle perceptions. This astral shape is to its material basis as our human character is to our physical appearance. We may imagine this astral shape, e.g., we may see a jar of opium as a soft, seductive woman with a cruel smile, just as we see in the face of a cunning and dishonest man the features of some animal, such as a fox." End quote. The idea being that in the physical world, everything also has an astral light form existing within it, though the subtle body may appear symbolic rather than as a replica of it. Everything in the physical world was created from the same source. Through evolution and mixing of particles over long periods of time, what started as individual particles transformed into complex organisms, be they alive or not. Rocks, vegetation, gases, animals, planets, everything. They all came from the same source and thus retain consciousness or light within them. And as I said earlier, the astral light is everywhere, in space void of matter and within objects. Though within objects, the astral light conforms to the shape of its container. It is that when one is seeing with their astral eyes, symbolic images appear which can yield a great many unconscious symbols. In a way, what I'm saying is that God is everywhere. And even though inanimate, everything is technically alive in that way, or possesses consciousness of the divine. And despite the astral form conforming to its vessel, it may change shape when viewed astrally, based on the perceiver's unconscious association with the physical thing. Now, lastly on this video essay, in Levi's Key of the Mysteries, quote, "Our will, by acting directly upon our plastic medium, that is to say, upon the portion of astral life which is specialized in us, and which serves us for the assimilation and configuration of the elements necessary to our existence, our will, just or unjust, harmonious or perverse, shapes the medium in its own image and gives it beauty in conformity with what attracts us. Thus, moral monstrosity produces physical ugliness, for the astral medium, that interior architect of our bodily edifice, modifies it ceaselessly according to our real or factitious needs. It enlarges the belly and jaws of the greedy, thins the lips of the miser, makes the glances of impure women shameless, and those of the envious and malicious venomous. When selfishness has prevailed in the soul, the look becomes cold, the features hard, the harmony of form disappears, and according to the absorption or radiant specialty of this selfishness, the limbs dry up or become encumbered with fat. Nature, in making of our body the portrait of our soul, guarantees its resemblance forever, and tirelessly retouches it." End quote. Now, whether Crowley as the translator or Levi as the author meant this literally or not, allegorically or not, I don't necessarily believe it is a certified fact to be taken literally in every case. Yes, our actions and thoughts certainly do affect our minds and our bodies, and the astral light is a sponge retaining all experience. I do take this at face value in terms of symbols on the astral plane. Unconsciously, we may ascribe images to all sorts of things, so that money may appear associated with green paper or gold coin, the treacherous may appear wolfish, and the dazed or confused with hypnotic wheels for eyes. Well, much is the same for the astral body. When we perceive things on the astral plane, very often what we are seeing is the unconscious interpretations of our mind applied to the physical item represented in its astral form. Note, there are many different astral planes, each unique to what it represents. There is the physical world, where we, in our astral body, actually maneuver through the universe. And then there are many planes, each symbolic, some close to Earth and some closer to the source. Mastering the astral is a process, but with time and practice, you can certainly learn how to go where you will and interpret things better. So there are, who knows, infinite planes based on all types of symbolic things. You could even go to all 10 Sephiroth, you could go to all 22 paths on the Tree of Life. So there are many planes, and we'll talk about that in the next video of how to actually do that. But I just wanted to mention the astral is vast. So exposing yourself to all of those things is a process, and learning how to maneuver through them, another process. So I'm going to end this video here, and like I said, in the next video on this subject, we will focus primarily on some common training exercises. This was the theory, next will come the practice. Love is the law, love and your will. Hope to see you in the next one.